Welcome to Performance Mesh. My name is John O'Neill. I'm here with my co-host, Eric Manis, and you, the listener. Eric, how you doing today?
Good, Johnny. Yankees got a big win last night. Shut up all those Mets fans in Queens. The season. Have you ever seen a team play so well and then play so poorly in the same season?
This is a big roller coaster. This is one of those like if you're playing a video game, right? Which we both probably don't have much time to do, but if we're playing a video game and simulating a franchise mode season, and you see the team get off to like a 52-18 start, you're like, all right, that's not realistic. And then you see the team go, at one point, they were like 22-30 in a 52 game stretch. And you're like, all right, that's not realistic. This team's too good.
Yeah.
So
That's unbelievable.
It does seem a little made up, but we'll see what happens come October. I still think they're set up to be good. I don't know if they're the favorite, but I think they're set up to be really good come October.
There's just a lot of bad things happen at once. I was thinking baseball is just it's an unforgiving sport, right? Like they had two big wins off their crosstown rivals, and they had to fly across the country to play another baseball game tonight. That just seems not fair.
Yeah, right. And it's weird how much momentum matters. So I'm actually listening to a book, not super consistently. Listening because I finished it. I just pulled it up because I forgot the name. I don't know how often you do Audible, but I always have like one or two things go on Audible, and sometimes I'm like locked in with them. Sometimes it's just like, all right, I'm gonna like slowly listen to this. But The Compound Effect by a guy named Darren Hardy. He talks a lot about how like much momentum matters and really anything in life. But you see that in sports. But I mean, obviously in our worlds in training, like if you have a few good training sessions in a row, like you're locked in on training.
Yeah, I think about like when you get like a lead, right, and you try to get a kid, you're getting the email of somebody that they're interested in training. I just want to get that person started training as soon as possible, and then just get as many good training sessions as we can. Because if we can just getting some progress early on, and we start feeling good about what's going on, chances are we have a long-term client. But if things are just like kind of being under the bush and it's a session here, session there, that's usually the person isn't going to be successful long-term.
Yeah, let's talk about that, right? So like when we as in anyone in our field, when you have a client who's like a session here, 2 weeks later, a session there, it's kind of just a giant waste of time, right?
Yeah. I had a kid. He was texting me today, and he said he was sore from a football game. So I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But then I remember like the kid plays safety and wide receiver, right? Like he doesn't. And he's in eighth grade. Like you're not going to get sore ever if you're playing like nose tackle offensive line. Okay, I could probably buy that, but I called the kid out on it, and he was and then eventually got at him. He didn't feel like coming. And I kind of just said, what? I don't feel like working with you right now because you don't really care. So
yeah, hey, you're not wrong. That's like so. Yeah. There's always a push to get people in as often as possible, and I used to definitely think that way. But I think there's a caveat there. So it should be like as often as realistically possible, right? So like, and I know it sounds the exact same thing, but here's the scenario. If somebody says to me, oh, I can come in like 3, maybe 4 days a week, start that person with 3.
Yeah.
Get them going with 3. Get them going on like with some momentum. Now, if somebody says like 1 or 2, one's not a great use of anyone's time. So
you got to get in here 2 days.
Yeah, then you convince them on 2. But if they're like 3 or 4 or 4 or 5, like unless you know their training history, where like them saying 4 or 5 probably means 5, start them with the lower option. And just establish like really good consistency, because there's nothing worse than like you have a kid on a program and it's 4 days a week and they're on like week 1, day 4, and it's like 12 days into the training process. And you're like, well, this is not how this is supposed to work.
Yeah. You gotta get comfortable with having conversations of like, dude, what's going on? Like you said that you were going to commit to this many days, and it's just not happening. How can we get you back on track? Because it's always just get back on track, and then, like you said earlier, building the momentum of progress.
Do you have a time in your career when you like where there was any like switch that flipped in terms of like, all right, screw it, I'm just gonna tell people what I actually think in terms of like their goals, versus just being like beating around the bush and being like, yeah, if you want to, like, you can come in this amount, etc.
Yeah. Uh, I guess I can't think of it now. Now I'm completely fine with it. Like it's like I think just it's our job as coaches to hold people to their word, right? And if you're just doing stuff that if your actions aren't matching what you said you were going to do, I I just find that to be one of the great like weaknesses in life, right? Like living to your word is probably the most important thing that a person can do. And if you can get somebody to do that early, I think that we're doing our job.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I will say for myself, like, it was definitely a few years into the field before I was
Yeah.
like very comfortable telling someone like, hey, if you actually want to accomplish this, is what you need to do. I think the setting where you are matters a lot, but like there is a weird transition or a sometimes uncomfortable transition as a young coach of like, oh yeah, I am gonna just tell the person what I think, and if they don't like it, they can leave. That's okay. Like, I'm not saying this like offensively. The way I usually try to get like
Yeah, we're not being like Joe. We're not being like Tommy Tough Nuts over here, right? Like, but we put a lot of like time into this. So like, if it's not going to be matched, like we probably both have a hard time with that.
yeah, like what's the point? I'll just train. So like I'll just train like in our setting. I have enough kids that want to be there and want to train hard that I don't want, you know, random kid who doesn't want to be there and is just kind of half-assing it all the time. I don't want him to take away the attention I should be giving to the people who want to be there. And so like, so I'll give you an example, right? So there's no shot this kid will listen to this, but just given what I'm about to say. But so kid trained a little bit with us each of the last two off seasons. Like, didn't really, like, clearly doesn't really care that much about training, right? I think he's been 2 days a week in the past. His mom wanted him to come more often. Now he's junior in high school, so now he's 4 days a week, which is the mom's idea, not his. And in my head, I'm like, okay, like I guess she doesn't really realize how not into this like this kid is. But you know, we're not gonna say that. Hey, if he wants to do 4 days a week, so he comes in and new program, and they're like coaches right around him to like ask questions to help with the new program, etc. And like I'm watching him, I'm 15 feet away from him, right? I'd said hi, I'm talking to somebody else nearby. He goes right from like sitting on a foam roller doing nothing, like skips almost an entire page, and just goes right over to like running, like doing like some sprinting stuff. And it's like, hey, what are we doing?
Yeah,
Like,
what are you doing, man?
I'm like, do you think what you just did was like is like what you should be doing? He's like, oh no, he just like thought he'd get away with it, right? And
Do the people think that we're dumb because like we're not
yeah,
like
right.
because
So
we're not wearing a suit or something like that?
seriously, right? But that's the conversation. The reason I'm telling this story is the first time I'm like, hey, don't do that again. Don't waste our time. Like your parents pay for this. They pay good money to be here. This only hurts you to approach it this way. And but if that happens a month or two from now, and I've got 15 kids I'm working with that all want to be there, and I'm across the other side of the gym, I'm not leaving the kids who want to be there, who want to work really hard and want my attention, to go give that kid attention. Like I'll give kids like that a few shots to change, and then after that, let them weed themselves out. We don't need them.
Yeah. Yeah, and there, we talk about pluses and minuses all the time in our previous conversation. You can't, the minuses add up, right? Like there's a certain level. If you like let that stuff happen, there's like a middle ground, and more kids are going to go to the minuses than the pluses.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into the group stuff we were talking about yesterday. So I think just given what you said, knowing in a group setting, knowing who your kind of clubhouse leaders or most influential people in the group are socially, I think is really valuable, because you can try to, as a coach, you can pick and choose which kids you try to win over first. And if you pick and choose the kids that don't talk to anybody or are not social leaders, it might take you longer to get full buy-in from that group. But if you're picking the team captains, the upperclassmen, the loud ones, the social ones, any combo of the above, and you win that kid over, it's going to be much, much easier to influence the rest of the group positively.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that was the other things we talked a lot of group training stuff yesterday. That's probably like my first thing that we didn't talk about yesterday. My second one, I wanted to talk a little bit about like time constraints and dealing with groups with time constraints. So like when you have an hour to train on your own, right? Unless you're doing some like heavier squat or deadlift day where you actually want to take 4, 5, 6 minutes rest between sets, etc. An hour for us, if you know what you're doing and know what you need warm up wise and know where to take your rest time, that's a lot of time. That's plenty of time, right? You can get quality work done in an hour, but when you have a large group, and a lot of it is set up and traffic flow, et cetera, an hour can go by really, really quickly. So how do you approach like mapping out if you have, let's say, an hour with a group, how do you approach like allotting what portion of the session to what modalities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that I've seen a lot of like high school weight room programs is they just try to do so much stuff. Like I've seen high school weight room programs that have like 16 exercises on a day, right? And you just do the time and you talk to the kids who like are training with you on your own. You're like, what are you doing at program? They kind of lay it out. You're like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. Like, do you get everything done? And they're like, oh no, not even close. So it's like, all right, well let's do stuff that like we know or we're gonna get a ton of bang of the buck out of, and we know like we can progress and regress and do all the things we need to. So first thing, I think that like a good warm up is for a high school kid has like a ton of value. Not a too much, but I think that like throwing, you know, 10 doing like a 10-minute warm up of just like mobility exercises where you're changing level, you're doing gymnastics stuff, gym class skips and stuff like that, where we're actually getting our body hot, we're working on movement skills. I think that has a ton of value, right? I think that from my perspective, sprinting is probably the most beneficial exercise you can do for a high school athlete. So I think that spending 15 to 20 minutes on speed work, or 10 to 15 minutes on speed work, again, is like super important and should be in every program. So let's just call that 25 minutes right there. Then I think we got 20 minutes. We'll throw another 10 minutes for like some jumping power exercises, right? So that puts us at 35. 10 minutes for a 10 to 15 minutes for like a really strong like A1 A1 to A2 of like a squat and a press or like a trap bar and a pull, and then like 2 to 3 accessory exercises, and I think that you're good to go after that.
Yeah, and I know you well enough to know what you mean with like different ranges and stuff. So like we obviously know like, oh, different periods of the year you're going to have the amounts shift up or down. You're also going to have to consider what they're doing outside of the time with you, right? So if they're doing a ton of conditioning stuff, like maybe you just like ease off on the amount of jumping and plyometric type stuff that you're doing with them. There's a lot of factors there, but for the most part, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like the group stuff that I've seen in terms of like, oh, what's the program look like at school, college, or high school? A lot of times it's just like trying to do too much for the sake of checking a box. And if you're not checking the box of like people doing things well, what's the point?
Yeah. It's like they see like every single exercise. It's like they see an exercise and think that has to be included in every single portion, every single day of your program, right? It's like you can there's different times of the year, right? And I was kind of thinking, what would a high school program look like? But there should every month at least should have an emphasis. Like, all right, we're gonna shift a little bit more strength right now because it's really far away from the season, or like it's June and July, and we really have to like make sure we're running enough and hitting our sprints. So maybe we'll do a little bit less strength work. So like there should be an emphasis no matter what we're doing.
I think people underrate at this point. Maybe it's our circles, right? It might just be our circles. Like underrate that like linear periodization actually works really well with
Yeah.
low training age people. And so we don't mean take every exercise, like maybe you might see it in a textbook or in a class setting, but we don't mean actually take every exercise and do it only for 15s and 12s and whatnot. I do think I know there is a component of what like Charlie Francis would call vertical integration. So, having different training stimuluses or stimuli, speed, strength, power, aerobic endurance, glycolytic endurance, etc., cycled through your program in amounts where you don't detrain the quality. So, for example, the reason I'm saying that is in your muscular endurance phase, right? Just to use names that people know, that doesn't mean that you're not doing any speed work or not doing any strength work. In fact, like you said, like the high school athletes we get, if they're in 4 days a week, they're sprinting 2 days a week, and we're going to ramp up that number and try to hit a little bit of sprint stuff all 4 days that they're in the last month before the season starts. And so even in their higher rep, more muscular endurance, hypertrophy type phases, they're still doing speed work. They're still doing some more like maximal strength type work, not necessarily 1 RMs, just, threes and fours at, 8 RP or some version of that. But people forget that, like, hey, you can still do a very linear model with people with low training age, and it's still going to work really, really well.
Yeah, for a long time now.
Yeah, for a long time. Like, I still use elements of it myself and been training for 10 years, right? I'm sure you do as well. But so yeah, that's kind of the big one. I would say my answer would have been pretty similar in terms of the group setting. Even just to simplify, like I'd probably go 50-50 in my head. Like 50% of the time is unweighted stuff and 50% of the time is weighted stuff. And I think you gave the numbers like 35-25.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
great way to. It's like, all right, we're gonna do all of our athletic stuff for 30 minutes, and then we're gonna do all of our getting stronger and bigger stuff for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like how great would that be if the world did that with high school kids, right? I think they would get a lot better.
Yeah, seriously. And some of the warm-up style stuff that's in the field, I think is really poor fits in group settings. So a lot of ground-based stuff, or like breathing, or really slow-paced, feel this, do this.
No.
Yeah, and a lot of especially like a high school team setting, which we train some of, or a college team setting. I admittedly don't have much experience with, but I did a little bit like shadowing stuff in college. But in terms of being the decision maker, I just feel like you're just not going to get buy-in. You're going to set a really poor tone for the session. So a lot of times with like the groups of lacrosse and soccer girls that I've had over the last 3-4 years, a lot of times we'll start with like very low level plyometric stuff and very like low level dynamic stuff and just get right into it. And then on the back end, I'll do like 5-10 minutes of mobility stuff on the back end, because at that point they want it. At the beginning, they're like, oh, like I'm going to half-ass my way through this mobility stuff because like, what are we doing here? But by the 50 to 55 minute mark, when we've accomplished a lot of stuff, that is a really good window to work on that stuff, because we still have time within the session. And they're like, all right, cool, I could use this. I'm going to feel better. Like, this is recovery, right? So I do like that style. Maybe not all the time, but as an option that people, I think, shouldn't be afraid to use.
I think that's such a
great point, because I'm just thinking about like when I was going to different schools and I would try to do all this ground-based stuff, and I was going to an all-boys school, right? So, and it's like you're going to an all-boys school after school. They've been in school since 8:30, 8 o'clock. They're just ready to explode and just fuck around for as long as they can, right? And then they got me telling them, all right, let's do our adductor rocks. And they're like, I don't give a shit about this, dude. I want to go fuck around with my friend, right? But if it's like, okay, like, pogo jumps right off the bat, they don't have time to think about fucking around, right? They have to jump as high as they can.
Lead taps, med ball rolling stuff is awesome for that, because it checks a lot of boxes from a warm-up standpoint, putting you in different planes, getting you at different joint angles. So going low, going high, the ones where you're like a crossover reach versus an open reach. So you're getting some elements of active thoracic rotation. You're also getting hand-eye coordination during it. And it's really hard to do well. and to do a bunch in a row. So like you're driving tissue temperature / heart rate, both of them, much faster than you're going to be able to do with any like other kind of like very more static or like let's do 5 lateral lunges on each side. There's a time and place for that, but I think in a group setting, especially in a male dominant group setting, like just getting them into stuff that's kind of hard, it sets the tone that you're not going to be pushed around for the whole session by kids.
And also, like,
I'm just like,
how about like an
ISO hold, right? Like, think about all the good things you would get with an ISO hold, and it's just an idea, but like, you get all these great qualities, and you can't think about messing around because my quad's on fire, right? And this is really hard. And this guy's like, when is this guy gonna call it so I don't look like a punk next to my friend?
Yeah, as long as you're accomplishing some version of a warm up. So I mentioned like driving tissue temperature, prepping the CNS. Those would be the 2 big rocks for me in a group setting, and then we'll worry about the mobility stuff as a more third, and then the other components of like actually practicing what you need to accomplish during the session would be to me like the 4th thing that you should be checking a box of. But if you're driving heart rate / tissue temperature, just going to drive tissue elasticity, which is going to allow you to express better range of motion, which if you're accomplishing that stuff and you can come up with ways to get people to move quickly and kind of ramp up their nervous system into a session, that's the most important thing prior to doing athletic and strength dominant stuff. We as a field have identified a bunch of like really low level corrective stuff for years that there's a time and place, but in a group warm-up setting, it's probably not it.
I just, I mean,
listen, and you're talking to the guy who brought every single mobility like training package and product possible, right? And you know, it did probably some good, but it
when you're dealing with
like untrained people, like often the weight room stuff is going to be the mobility exercises that you need to do. Like if you're doing a really good front squat, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah, totally agreed. Totally agreed. And you get a much better appreciation for that when you have people long term. So you see people year after year after year, and the guys who like love the mobility stuff and like just hammer a bunch of extra mobility stuff, they kind of move the same. Like
they're just I don't know why, but like there's probably just people. I mean, just like what you did as a kid, right? Like if you're just stiff as a kid, you're probably gonna be stiff for like a really long time. You kind of just move that way. Yeah. And the people who are really loose and don't really need that stuff, like they're just kind of loose. Their joints move differently than the other people's.
The people who over time, in my opinion, who move better, at least in our model, are the people who take technique in the weight room seriously from the get-go, right? They're trying to do things well in the weight room at all times. They're not just like half-assing reps or like kind of mailing it in at the end of a session. It's the people who are like focused and actually diligent about doing reps with good technical execution who move better or move more efficiently over time. It's not the people who like are like, oh, I'm tight, I'm gonna hammer a bunch of extra mobility stuff. So one of the tenets of the mesh, right, of the performance mesh, is that we're going to bring sports and entertainment to you guys, right? So I know last episode we talked some Jets quarterback, and we left you guys with a little teaser for what we're going to do here. So I'm sure Eric is prepared for this. I'm sure he's gone through the list a little bit. But Eric, how do you want to structure this?
John, I'm going to
start the clock.
And you're going to
name all of as many quarterbacks in Redskins history as you can.
Who have started a game, correct?
Who have started a game. Let me pull up the list. All right, I have it. And the list I have is from 1932.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with some early names on purpose, and then I'll shift into modern times when I can actually rattle off a bunch.
Okay.
And the clock is going to start. Hold on.
And you're counting, right?
I'm gonna tally.
All right. And so just
ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Set.
Sammy Baugh, Eddie LeBaron, starter in the 50s. Guy named Norm Snead started in the early 60s. Sonny Jurgensen, I believe, took his spot in the 60s. That's 4. Billy Kilmer was the starting quarterback on the 72 team that went to the Super Bowl. We'll fast forward about 5 years. So those are my early Redskins knowledge guys. Then we'll go Joe Theismann, was there for a while. Joe Theismann is arguably their best quarterback in franchise history, won the first Super Bowl, et cetera. But then you go Theismann, you go Jay Schrader, you go Doug Williams, who won Super Bowl 22, Mark Rippon, started in Super Bowl 26. Then let's go Heath Schuler, first round pick in the mid 90s.
Schuler here.
You know Heath Schuler? He would have been mid 90s.
What year? What mid 90s?
94, 95 in there. Man, I might have a name.
I don't see Heath.
That's okay.
I know. I see him. Sorry.
See him? All right.
You'll get a couple extra seconds on that.
Gus Farrat would have been after him. Trent Green, although I'm not convinced Trent Green ever started a game.
Trent Green started
14 games in 1998.
Okay, yep. He wasn't good then. He went to the Chiefs and was good after. Trent Green, then you go Brad Johnson, Tony Banks, Danny Werfel, Shane Matthews, Patrick Ramsey, Mark Brunell, Jason Campbell. There's a guy named John Beck in this time period. I may skip
he definitely
started for.
Yep, John Beck. I'll shift forward a little bit here, but Rex Grossman, RG3, Robert Griffin III, Kirk Cousins,
10 seconds.
Mark Sanchez, Josh Johnson, Kyle Allen, Jason Campbell. I think I skipped that name. Dwayne Haskins, Alex Smith,
Time.
Taylor Heineke. Yep.
You got 1,
2. You got 30 quarterbacks.
I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, that was
Great.
Who did I? So I'm missing.
You want some names? You want some names that you missed?
I'm missing some names between 2000 and 2010 that I definitely saw play.
Did you say?
You said Danny Banks, Shane Matthews. Did you say?
Shane Matthews, I said him.
Patrick Ramsey, Danny Werfel, Jeff George.
I forgot Jeff George. The other guy I forgot is Todd Collins.
Todd Collins.
Started with Jason Campbell. Jason Campbell, Todd Collins is a bad quarterback duo.
Todd Collins got hot one year for like 4 games, and then that was it.
Jason Campbell
started a bunch of years.
Yeah, he was there for a while, and it's basically him to nobody.
Was the quarterback in 2011.
Yeah, so that was right before RG3 in 2012. I forgot Case Keenum was around there in like 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. Maybe right after Kirk Cousins left, maybe 2019.
It doesn't say
he started a game.
Maybe it wasn't Case Keenum. Who am I thinking of?
Oh, no, Case Keenum
in 2019.
Yeah, 2019. Okay. Yep. That was as a Washington football fan, it's like hopeless when you go into years and you don't have a quarterback. Everybody's like, "Oh, Carson Wentz, why they give up what they give up, spend so much money on him, etc." But when you go into a year and your quarterback is like halfway decent, you actually have a shot in the NFL. When you go into a season, your quarterback's bad, you have no shot.
You have no chance.
You have no shot. Like your upside is you go 10, I guess 17 games now. So you go 10-7 is your absolute upside if you have no quarterback.
If your quarterback is
bad,
and you're going to get bounced first round. That is the absolute best you can do with a bad quarterback.
Yeah, Chicago Bears had bad quarterbacks for a long time, and they were always in the playoffs with like Urlacher and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You have to have a great defense and everything great special teams, everything go your way, and you still win like 10 games against bounce and get bounced right away in the playoffs.
Football is a difficult sport, man. You are just playing professional sports. You think people realize how jacked up you get during a professional sports season?
You see it like working with some of those guys, more so on the baseball side. But when you see people like late off season and like, oh, this is what you look like when you're like in like the peak health version of you, and then you see them when they come back, you're like, what happened?
Yeah, what happened to you?
Yeah,
you just get destroyed.
Yeah, like you are significantly stiffer everywhere. You either gained bad weight or lost muscle weight or both. Like, and just it's almost like if the baseball season was 8 months instead of 6, everyone would get hurt, right? And
Yeah, they're just
That's it.
so close.
anytime you say
Really?
everyone would something would happen to them, it's just like a not factual statement. So it's obviously an exaggeration, but like the baseball season is long already. If they somehow decided to add 3 months to it, like you just wouldn't have guys who could make it.
Just hanging on by a thread.
Right at that point. Hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna wrap it up soon. But like, when you see a guy who's like pretty high level and he's kind of just like maybe teetering of being a true major leaguer, like, have you ever seen? And this is just kind of thoughts from my head. What is like the motivation of that guy? Are they like, I never want to play baseball again, or like, are they, oh, I'm so close, I just want to get to the next season, or is it just like, get me out of here? Like, what is the psyche of that athlete?
It's so all over the map.
Really.
So like we have guys who aren't close at all, and it's like that's all they want to do, and there's a really high motivation. We have guys who are really close, or have had guys who are really close and just don't want to do it. I'll name one without naming names. So the guy was in AAA for 6 years and spent like 2 weeks in the big leagues and was still a pretty good AAA pitcher. And he had hit minor league free agency, so his money was decent. Like it was, probably 6 figures or close to it, just from hitting minor league free agency as a good AAA pitcher. And he was like, "All right, that's it. I'm done. I'm not playing next year."
Yeah.
And
That's amazing, isn't it?
yeah.
And it can suck the life out of you, man.
I also named another guy without naming names who we had for multiple off seasons, maybe 2018, 2019, around there, who legit through 95, 97, and he was still going to college. Like he was still going to college for a couple semesters after in the fall in those years, because he still had time because he didn't graduate because they started pro ball after junior year. And the second year, he was like 95, 97, good stuff, etc. Plus arm. The second year, he just like stopped showing up in December for a few weeks. And I remember like, all right, if somebody goes a few days, unless I like have talked to them about like, oh, I'll see you on this day. Somebody goes a few days, like, all right, maybe some come up. Then after like a couple days, you're like, what's going on? And then you start thinking maybe I'm just missing them and like somebody else is working with them. So I remember asking our pitching coach at the time, like, hey, have you seen so and so? Like, man, I haven't seen him in like 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, me neither. Like, what? Like, and we had like a bigger for us pro crowd at that time. It was like 15 to 18 guys probably, pretty consistently. And so it wasn't like one of three that we were just worried. It was like one of the guys who was kind of quieter and wasn't necessarily there every day. And so I texted him, reach out, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, forgot to tell you, I retired. I'm taking a finance job. Like, I just don't want to train anymore and like go back to playing minor league baseball." Like this guy was a better talent than most of the pro guys we have. So who knows? That's one of those, like, you never know what people want to do. The guys who feel bad for are the guys who like haven't put any secondary thought into what happens outside of baseball, and
You kind of have to do that,
Though,
you kind of have to lock in like that.
But if you're not to be close, an essence of like burn the boats,
Yeah, if
you're not close.
If you're not close, I think it's your family or friends or somebody's responsibility to say like, hey, like what else is there in life? What else do you want to do? Like just in case, right? Like I'm sure you've had thoughts like early in your career, like, hey, if this doesn't work out, what do I do?
Oh my God.
It doesn't mean you're not into your career. I just think it's like almost irresponsible to let somebody get past the age of 24, 25 and not have any other thoughts unless their career is climbing. Right.
Yeah,
if their career is climbing, it's different. But
I just
always think about how, man, pro sports is tough, man. It is a tough business. And it's probably incredible to be a part of, but it definitely has I mean, there are worse jobs, but it's not an easy life.
No, yeah, no doubt. All right, so next week I'm actually in Yellowstone National Park. Maybe we'll do maybe a little bit of national park themed discussion next episode we have in a couple weeks.
Oh my god! I mean,
And that's gonna be incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't wait. We got 6 nights, good spots for staying, so it'll be a good time.
oh, enjoy yourself, Johnny.
You deserve it, my friend.
All right. Hey, so Eric, we will obviously talk soon. Listeners, we'll talk soon as well. Thank you for joining.